Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to look closely at a situation many of you have likely seen, starting from a Facebook post by Peggy Chen, Cohen Jay's wife. You shared this one with us, and it really brings up some significant questions about the legal issues her husband's facing right now.
Yeah, and it's really important as we start this deep dive that we stick to the content of what Peggy Chen actually wrote. This is obviously a sensitive topic, lots of strong opinions out there, but our aim is just to understand the concerns she's raising, what they might imply without us taking any sides here.
Absolutely. So our mission today is really to unpack these four main points of concern that Peggy Chen lays out in her post about her husband's legal treatment. Let's jump right into the first one. She talks about the search warrant at their home.
Right. This first one is about both the timing of that warrant and, well, the justification, the reasons given for it.
Okay, so let's break down the timeline she gives. She talks about her father-in-law being seriously ill back in late August last year. Ko Wen-ji was apparently at the hospital a lot. And this all led up to August 30th, the day they were planning to sign a surgical consent form.
And she really emphasizes this point. The raid on their home happened on that exact same day, August 30th. The day he was supposed to be dealing with this critical family health issue. The timing certainly looks striking.
It does. And adding to that, Peggy Chen says the warrant itself just cited the Anti-Corruption Act. She makes a point that it didn't give specific reasons or any concrete evidence to back up the need for a search. Sounds like a very broad basis.
Well, that's interesting. Usually you'd expect a warrant to state the law, sure, but also outline the suspected offenses and what they're looking for, with some specifics. A really broad warrant, sometimes that could be challenged. But what's really key is what she says next about the indictment. She claims the final charges didn't have any evidence from before that raid. Yeah, she's saying the whole case was essentially built on items they found during the search itself.
That's a really critical point she's making there. And then she gets into a specific accusation from the prosecutors that Ko Wen-jae told someone to leave the country sometime between August 27th and 29th.
Right. And Peggy Chen asks some pretty direct questions about that, like, where's the proof for this claim? And she mentions their phones were confiscated. Wouldn't those phones maybe have some record if instructions like that were actually sent? That's the implication.
And she also brings in the human side of it, reminds everyone about the huge pressure Ko Wen-ji was under then, his father's health, his own schedule. It paints a picture of someone pretty intensely focused on immediate family concerns. Makes it seem, less likely he was orchestrating something else, at least from her view.
Okay, let's shift to her second big point. This one involves allegations about hidden money, hidden wealth.
Yes, and the numbers she mentions here are pretty substantial. Peggy Chen talks about authorities claiming there's a huge amount of cash hidden somewhere supposedly between NT $60 million and NT $300 million.
And she highlights something crucial about this claim. Apparently, it's based on the testimony of just one person.
Just one, wow.
Yeah, which immediately makes you wonder about, reliability, corroboration for such a serious claim.
Definitely. Especially when you hear her next point. Despite these huge allegations in the home raid, no cash like that was ever actually found.
Exactly. The missing money seems to directly contradict the accusation.
Right.
And Peggy Chen adds to this by pointing out, why wasn't there any investigation of nearby surveillance footage? If someone's moving millions in cash, you'd think there might be some visual evidence around the area, maybe.
Good point. She then shares a detail. Quite relatable, they don't even own a car, and they hardly ever use their garage. Which, kind of clashes with the idea of secretly shifting massive bundles of cash around. How would you even do that easily?
It makes it harder to picture, yeah. Then Peggy Chen includes this quote from Ko Wen-jae in court. He apparently said, "I am a doctor. My whole life has been dedicated to saving people. I didn't know there was a profession dedicated to harming others." Now, the context she gives is important here.
Thanks.
She says it wasn't meant as a direct insult to prosecutors. It was more his way of stressing the need for prosecutions based on evidence, on facts, not just accusations. It sort of shows his frustration with what he felt was a lack of solid proof.
Right, so it's about his feeling that the claims aren't backed by facts. Let's look at the third area she brings up, this Mookie company and the whole political donations thing.
So this centers on the Control Yuan, that's a government branch that investigates and audits officials saying that money from selling merchandise through this Mookie company was wrongly declared as political donations.
And Peggy Chen points out that prosecutors are taking this very seriously, possibly framing it as embezzlement and corruption, which could mean a really heavy prison sentence. The stakes seem very high there.
And this is where she draws some, well, interesting comparisons. She mentions other campaign-related shops or entities linked to other big political names, Tsai Ing-wen's campaign store, Lai Ching-te's Lai Sang shop, even Chen Shui-bian's hat factory back in the day. All of these likely made money selling things too.
Ah, okay. So her point is...
Her question, and it's pretty pointed, is if those operations also brought in money, why weren't those politicians accused of embezzlement like Ko Wen-jae is being accused now?
Yeah, that definitely raises questions about, consistency. Is the rule being applied fairly across the board?
It suggests, at least from her perspective, a potential double standard or maybe just an inconsistency in how similar situations with different people have been treated. And that kind of perceived difference, understandably, fuels worries about whether the current process is truly impartial.
Okay, her fourth main point then moves to the bigger picture of income from, business activities during a campaign and how that money relates to political accounts.
Right. The prosecution's stance, as Peggy Chen describes it, seems very broad. Essentially, that all money from any business activity by a candidate has to go into a political donation account. If it doesn't, that's corruption. It's a very wide interpretation.
And she uses a specific example, the concept where Ko Wen-jae apparently didn't make any personal profit and actually donated the money raised to Mu Sheng. But even that, she says, is being treated as potential embezzlement under this broad rule.
And again, she contrasts it with past practice. She asks about candidates before who made money selling books during their campaigns. If the prosecutor's current logic holds, she asks, shouldn't that also be illegal embezzlement if the money didn't go into a political account?
These comparisons really make you think about the potential precedent being set here, don't they? And what it could mean for anyone in politics who might have other income sources. It feels like a very strict, maybe even new way of applying these rules.
It does raise questions about interpretation and application. Finally, Peggy Chen talks about the hearing about visitation rights for Ko Wen-jae to attend his father's funeral. And this part of her post gives a very personal, quite emotional look at things.
Yes, she describes this dynamic in the courtroom. She says the judge kept asking the prosecutor how many days of visitation would be allowed. The way she paints it, with her husband and the prosecutor kind of positioned below the judge, is quite a striking image, suggests a certain power imbalance.
And her question about the judge's role seems fair. Was the judge just acting as a mediator between the two sides? Or, given the circumstances of funeral, should there have been a more formal ruling based on, legal principles and basic humanity?
And she notes that in the end, the decision on visitation days just followed what the prosecutor offered, which, understandably, caused more upset and raises questions about the court's independent authority in that moment.
And Ko Wen-jae's reaction, as she tells it, "We don't beg," really speaks volumes about how she sees his character, stubborn, determined, even when facing really tough personal times. His preferring to put up with physical pain rather than seem like he's faking. That's a powerful image she paints.
Peggy Chen wraps up this section by saying she feels like she's let her husband and his supporters down, and she talks about praying every day for a fair trial and fair treatment. It's a very raw, personal look at the emotional cost these proceedings are having on the family. You can really feel that coming through.
So just to quickly recap, we've gone through the four main concerns Peggy Chen laid out: the questionable timing and basis of the search warrant, the claims of huge hidden wealth that wasn't found, the different treatment of Mooke revenue compared to other similar cases, and this very broad interpretation of how business income must be handled during campaigns, plus the really difficult situation around the funeral visitation hearing.
And running through her whole statement is this fundamental appeal, this plea for a fair trial and just equal treatment under the law for her husband. She's sharing her view as someone right in the middle of it, watching the process unfold and expressing some deep worries about it.
Yeah, and her final message in the post is pretty powerful. She voices this broader concern. If this kind of thing can happen to one person, whoever they are, maybe it sets a precedent. Maybe it could happen to anyone. She basically urges people to keep paying attention to how this case develops.
Which really brings us to our final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given all the concerns Peggy Chen has raised about these legal proceedings against her husband, what does fair trial and treatment actually look like in situations that are this complex, this politically charged? And maybe more broadly, what role does public awareness, does public scrutiny play in trying to make sure those basic principles of justice are upheld for everyone in society? It's a question that definitely goes beyond just this one case, touching on the foundations of the rule of law itself.